Hey, okay, we're going to talk in this video about contrast. Contrast in writing occurs when an author describes two very different things next to each other to vividly show how different the two things are. And vivid means really, really clearly, really colorfully, not just regular, but just vivid. Like you really get it. You really understand what the person was trying to say. And first, what I want to say is that contrast, this word can be a couple different things. It can be a noun, it can be a verb. And so, depending on what it is, it changes how it's pronounced. So, contrast is a noun. This whole lesson is on contrast, which is a literary technique, and that's a noun. And it's pronounced contrast with the accent on the first syllable. But the word contrast can also be a verb. You can contrast two things when you describe the differences between them. For example, you could write, my teacher wants me to contrast flowers and bombs in a short essay. When it's a verb, you pronounce it, you usually pronounce it contrast. You can also say contrast, but usually it's pronounced contrast. And then past tense is contrasted. For example, like I contrasted two different things in my English paper. And then you can also use it as, you can also say the word contrasting or contrasting. Either way, contrasting, contrasting, it's an adjective. It means that two different views or two different viewpoints are different. And there's more information about this on the website, not so much here in the brain sheet, but there's a little bit more detail about contrasting, contrast, and contrast on the website. So again, I was saying that that contrast is when you describe two very different things next to each other to vividly show how different the two things are, and it can be a really cool and really interesting way to describe something. So here's what I mean. Let's say that you had somebody in the army, right? Some soldier in the army, and this soldier was a pretty lightweight person. Wasn't a big, strong, powerful person, but yet was lightweight, but yet was very skilled in combat and was very good with fighting the enemy. So what you could say here's an example of contrast. So here's feathers, which are light, okay? And then here are tanks, which are heavy and dangerous. And so if you wanted to use contrast, you could say that that soldier was a featherweight tank, okay? And that's contrast right there. You're not just saying this soldier was a tank. You're saying that this soldier was a featherweight tank. And that contrast between a feather and a tank really kind of drives the point home with the reader, and you're thinking, wow, this person is really light, and but really, really dangerous and really strong too. So that's just an example of contrast. And here's the reason why you use it. It's because it's an effective way to draw the reader's attention to something you want to point out. And here's an example. If you look at this group of squares, okay, I want you to look at one of these. I want you to look at one of these. Now, which one do I want you to look at? Well, you can't really tell because there's no contrast between the all of these and the one I want you to see. But if you see this next example, you'll see that here, this one right here is the one I want you to look at. And the reason why, and you could say it a couple different ways. You could say that this square here contrasts with the other squares, or you could say that you see this square because of the contrast between it and the other squares. So here, the contrast of this square here is what's drawing your eye to it from all the other squares. And that's why contrast can be such an effective thing to write about. Here's sort of a visual example. These two pictures are both of the same motocross racer. Same thing. This picture has a low level of contrast, and this picture has a high level of contrast. It's low contrast because the grays, the darks are not very dark and the lights are not very light. But here, this picture here has a lot more punch to it. It just has a lot more contrast. Now if you were reading a magazine or looking at something online, and which picture do you think you would see published? it would be this picture right here because it has more contrast, it has more punch, it's just more, it has more of a visual impact than this picture. And writing can be the same way. Here, for example, all right, here's an example. Here's a, an okay sort of paragraph. Jim entered the room nervously and saw the terrible note he knew she had left for him. He picked up the note and read it, and the words triggered a chilling fear deep inside his heart. Okay, I mean, that's not bad, really. I mean, it's pretty good writing. It's okay, but let's look at this. Let's put some contrast in there. Let's contrast these words: quick and calm, screamed and silent, and burned and icy. So look at this writing. Jim entered the room with a quick calmness. See, because he knew something was going on. He knew that note was waiting for him on the table. And on the table screamed the silent note he knew she had left for him. He picked up the note and read it, and its words burned an icy fear into his heart. You see this here, like the note was silent, but it was screaming. Okay, that's contrast between screaming and silence. And it just makes for, you could argue that this is fine, and it is. It is fine. But I mean, this gives it a little bit more spice. It gives it a little bit more of an impact that the silent note was screaming. And that's why people use contrast. You don't have to use it all the time, but if you can use it because it makes your writing a lot more interesting. And here on the brain sheet, there's just some more examples of what's contrast and what's not contrast. And then there's also, of course, the assessment here, and you should do all of these. And if you can get these all correct, if you can get a 10 out of 10 up here, then you understand contrast. So you'll write a little note, and then your teacher will fill out the rubric. And when you get 10 out of 10, you know that you have contrast down. And it's a good thing to know. It's a good thing to be able to recognize, and it's a great thing to be able to do when you're writing. So I encourage you to just click on the website, do the brain sheet, and look around at the rest of the site, and I'll see you in another video.